People always tell me that they don't want to look like a tourist when they're in Spain. Look, there's nothing wrong with being a tourist, but I always say to people that you're going to have a much more memorable, less stressful, and probably cheaper experience if you can get in sync with the locals and local rhythms. So in this video, I'm going to give you the 10 unspoken rules that tourists keep breaking when they come to Spain. And so by the end of this video, you're going to be ready to have a trip in Spain that's more memorable and, importantly, more authentic. Okay, our first unspoken rule is about eating out. You have to be assertive if you want to get service in a Spanish tapas bar or restaurant. You know, in some cultures, people are used to the waitstaff being really attentive, you know, asking if they need another drink, a top up, more food, or even kicking them out of the restaurant, you know, once they've paid their bill. But here in Spain, it's much more hands off. So that means you have to be assertive about your needs. So if you want to get a drink, if you want to get the menu, or if you want to get the bill, you really have to ask for it. You have to kind of chase that waiter down. ¿Me pones por favor una 00? ¿Y qué quieres, Carlos?
Otra 00, ¿no?
Dos. Finally, I have my photo on a wall in a Spanish restaurant or bar in Casa Tony. So whether you're standing at the bar or sitting, if you want to get the waiter's attention, just put your hand up, catch their eye and say something like disculpe or perdona. And they might not come straight away because often waiters in Spain have a lot more tables to take care of than you might be used to back home. But you know, if they forget or if they don't come in the next few minutes, just gently, perdona, disculpe, just ask them again. Be polite, but be assertive. And remember, generally they're not going to bring the bill unless you ask for it and until you ask for it. You know, here they're not as focused on turning tables. So it's not like the minute you finish eating, they're going to put the bill down and kick you out. Qué bien. Muchas gracias. One of my favorite dishes in all of Spain, boquerones en vinagre. A ver. It's like a vinegary slap across the face. Okay, so you've finished your meal, you've fought for the bill, and you're wondering if you have to leave a tip. And if so, how much? Well, let's get one thing clear. Waiters in Spain are paid, or should be paid, a living wage. So there's no obligation ever to tip. It's up to the diner, at the diner's discretion, if the food and the service was good.
¿Los españoles dejan propina?
Sí,
No me parece tan seguro.
no, sí, sí.
¿Sí? ¿Sí? ¿Siempre o...?
Siempre no.
¿No?
Nunca es obligatorio.
However, warning, I have seen reports of some restaurants in touristy parts of Spain that are putting suggested tips on the bill. Literally on the bill, it has a 0% tip, if you want to leave 0%, and it has a sad face. And then next to a 10% suggested tip, it has a happy face. Now that is not normal, and it means, effectively, you're in a tourist trap.
El español sí que no mide porcentaje, es el detalle.
El detalle.
Es el detalle.
Sí.
Como el guiri.
¿El guiri?
El guiri sí es un porcentaje más. Yo sí le digo que si un 10%, yo siempre cuento,
Vale.
hace sus cuentas.
But you might be wondering, if you're paying with a credit card or debit card, can you leave a tip? If you haven't got change on you, can you add that tip onto your bill? And yes, you can. So say if the bill was, 48 euros, you might just say, charge me 50. And I'll charge 50 on your card, and ideally that extra 2 euros goes to the waiter. Oh, and these days you can ask for your food to take away, a doggy bag. Just say, me lo pones para llevar, por favor. So I often hear people complain about bad customer service in Spain, and I get it. Customer service can be really bad here, particularly if you're dealing with a bank or bureaucracy or some shops. But here's the thing, sometimes customer service in Spain that's actually good is misinterpreted as bad by people who don't understand the Spanish culture. That happens in a busy place like this one. There's always a million people in here. There's no time for pleases and thank yous or even smiles often, but it doesn't mean the service is bad. Hola, buenas. Una napolitana de crema. Smells amazing. Here in the Mallorquina, the focus for the waiters and the staff is on efficiency. They're trying to get through these crowds as quickly as possible. Don't expect them to be taking care of your feelings. They're just going to try and get through the crowds. Plus, in Spain and in Spanish, pleases and thank yous are often implied in how we say things and not stated explicitly. As a result, you get served faster ideally, and your napolitana de crema comes out hot. It doesn't have time to get cold, and that's really what you came here for. So perfectly warm and delicious. Carlos, ¿quieres? Guys, if you didn't already know, I've written a travel guide to Madrid. It's the guide I wish I had when I moved here. It's full of all my favorite places to eat and drink. It's got full neighborhood guides, secret stops, shops, transport tips, scams to avoid, full cultural coverage on the best museums in Madrid, everything to make sure you have a more memorable and authentic time in the city. And inside the guide is an exclusive Google map that has all my favorite places plotted, my favorite bars and restaurants, everything. So when you're walking around Madrid, you can just pull out your phone and you can see if there's a great place to eat or a cool shop nearby. It helps you plan your trip. Guys, if you're curious to check out my city guide, Madrid Revealed, check the link in the description. All right, let's get back to it. Okay, the next unspoken rule is all about how to be in sync with the locals. It's critical to understand if you want to be going to restaurants when they're actually open, you don't want to be going to shops when they're all closed. It's about how the Spaniards kind of schedule their lives and how you should think about scheduling your day as a tourist. Okay, so first up, shops in the morning are often going to open later than maybe you're used to. They possibly won't open till about 10, 10:30 or even 11 a.m. But look, if you want to get breakfast somewhere early, you want to search on Google or look around for a cafeteria. A cafeteria will look like a tapas bar on the outside, but it's actually somewhere that's going to open earlier, often around 8, 9 a.m. So you can grab breakfast, cup of coffee, and start your day that way. Oh, and by the way, this cafeteria is closed because today's Monday. So lots of restaurants also close on Mondays. Be aware of that. And then once the shops are open about 10 a.m. in the big cities and in the center, they're going to stay open all day till maybe about 8 p.m. or so. But in the neighborhoods, like this neighborhood in Madrid or in the small towns, shops are going to open about 10, then they're going to close again at 2 for about 3 hours for a long lunch break. And then they'll open again at 5 until about 8. So right down the street, it's now 3 o'clock. All these shops are closed because they're having that 3-hour lunch break. So that's one of the reasons why it makes sense to have lunch when the locals are having lunch at 2 p.m. because then you'll have a big long lunch, maybe after that have a walk or a siesta, and then by 5 p.m. you're up and about again and everything's open. And if you're an early eater, really the earliest that the kitchens will open here is 1 p.m. and they'll usually serve food until about 4 p.m. And then when it comes to dinner, tapas bars and restaurants usually aren't going to open until about 8, 8:30 and they'll serve food right through till midnight. But beware, you might see on Google that some tapas bars say they're open all day from say midday till midnight, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the kitchen is open the entire time. The kitchen might only be open from 12 to 4 and 8 onwards. So you want to call them up and say, ¿A qué hora abre la cocina? What time does the kitchen open? Then you can make sure. And finally, there are all-day kitchens where tapas bars will be serving food all day. Generally, those are a little more touristy. But look, if you're traveling with kids or whatever, it makes sense, right? Feel free to use them. You have my permission. Okay, next up, let's tackle some unspoken transport rules that'll help you get around the cities that you're visiting. First up, when you're on the escalator, make sure you stand on the right so that people who want to walk up and down can do so on the left. That's really important. And if you see an elevator, only use it if you need it, i.e. you have mobility issues or you're with a child or you have suitcases. They're reserved for people who really need them. And remember, when you're getting on the train, make sure you stand back and let people to get out first. Otherwise, someone might give you a little shove, or at least they might say, hay que dejar salir antes de entrar. Oy, sorry, I almost broke my own rule. And if you're thinking of not using public transport and you're going to jump in a taxi or an Uber, maybe think twice. I've seen people walk out of a tapas bar and jump right into a cab to get back to their hotel, and it takes them longer in the cab to get there than if they were just going to walk or take public transport because of the compactness and the traffic in these historic centers all over Spain. So wine and beer play a big part in Spanish social culture, which might lead you to believe that we're constantly drinking alcohol anywhere and everywhere. Well, yes and no. Here's the thing. Day drinking is generally accepted in Spain. So if you order a vermouth or a glass of wine or a beer at 11 a.m., which it is right now, nobody's going to think you're a raging alcoholic. You know, one of the things I love is that in Barcelona, you can go to a market and have a big, hearty cooked breakfast and order cava with it. People are doing that, having cava, sparkling wine, with their breakfast. It's a beautiful tradition. And you'll still see people sitting down in the middle of their workday, you know, for a big lunch and enjoying a glass of wine. But there are some buts. You see, Spanish attitudes around drinking alcohol and customs are changing. So you're less likely these days to see people drinking wine with their lunch on a workday. People still do it, but it's just not as common. Plus, Spain is now one of the largest consumers of zero alcohol beer in the world. 13% of beer sold is zero alcohol, which means when you're at the tapas bar at any time, during a workday, but on a Friday night, you're going to see a lot of people drinking stuff like this. If you want to order a zero alcohol beer, just ask for una cero cero, which just means zero, like 100% zero alcohol beer. And taste isn't quite the same, but it's pretty good. And while we do like wine with a meal and maybe a gin tonic afterwards, you won't find Spaniards getting really, really drunk very often. Spaniards drink slow and steady. And when you're drinking together or having a meal with wine, the focus was really on the company and on the food and on the time spent together rather than knocking back as much booze as quickly as possible. And you might be wondering if you can drink in public in Spain. Well, that's kind of regulated at the city level. And technically in Madrid, for example, no, you can't. But really, that is a law more focused on big groups of people getting drunk together on a Friday night in a square. So look, here's the deal. If you're walking around the historic center of a Spanish city, knocking back a big can of beer and maybe being a little unruly, you might have some trouble with the police. But if you're sitting in a park, having a picnic with a bottle of wine, nobody's ever gonna bother you. And lastly, remember that the legal drinking age in Spain is 18. And while drinking age laws might be a little bit more laxly enforced in Spain than in other countries, keep in mind that the owner of a bar or restaurant can get in trouble, if there's a minor drinking on the premises. So understand if they don't let your 16 or 17-year-old child, have a small glass of wine with their lunch. So I come from New Zealand, where we have mastered the art of always having a public toilet, a clean public toilet, within a few meters of wherever you are. See, in New Zealand, we have competitions to see which is the best public toilet in the country, and public toilets are even tourist attractions. Spain, however, has focused its creative energies in other areas. So when nature calls, what are the unspoken rules about where you can find a toilet? Yeah, we do have public toilets in Spain, but they're really few and far between. And to be honest, I don't know anyone who uses them for fear of what they're going to find inside. And I wanted to get in here and check it out, but this one's out of order. There is another one here in the historic center. We're going to go and check that one out because I do want to go in and see if it's up to my standards as a Kiwi. I thought the other public toilet in the Madrid center was in this square, but now I can't find it. Literally, this is, according to the map of public toilets in Madrid, this is a public toilet, but it no longer is. It once was. I'm sure there was a public toilet here. I feel like I'm going a little crazy, but really that tells you, this experience tells you everything you need to know about the public toilet situation in Spain. What do the locals do when they need to go to the toilet if they're out and about here? Well, in short, you go into a bar, a tapas bar or a restaurant, you order a cup of coffee, and you use the toilet. That's what we do. So I've recently started driving in Spain after getting my driver's license switched over to a Spanish one, and doing so has been an eye-opening and sometimes life-threatening experience. Are you ready for the ride of your life, Yoli?
I'm not quite sure. Let's see.
Get ready. Buckle up, baby. Okay, so first up, Spaniards never indicate. They just don't use the indicator.
Hey, I indicate.
That's true. Correction. Yoli is the only Spaniard who indicates when driving. None of the rest of them do. So you have to be hyper aware of lane changers constantly. The second one is roundabouts. Roundabouts in Spain are a total Wild West. People are weaving and changing lanes and coming at you from all directions. Combined with the fact that they don't indicate means that you have no idea what's happening. So all I would say is just be hyper aware of people coming at you from the left when you join a roundabout. And once you're in it, it's like a rushing rapid. Just go with the flow and who knows what's going to happen, and get out of there as quick as you can. The third one is so complex, I don't even understand it myself. So I have to pull over so I can explain it to you. Okay, and the third one, and this is the one I struggle with the most, try not to run anyone over. You see, at certain traffic lights, sometimes they will be flashing orange, and this is because there's a pedestrian crossing there, and you have to look and see if the pedestrian who might be about to cross has a red or green light for themselves, which means craning your neck around to see their thing while you're trying not to, run anyone over on the road. And then depending on what you see for the pedestrian, then maybe you have to keep going or maybe you have to stop. As you can see, I don't really understand it, and I'm very nervous about running someone over. Yoli, do you understand this rule?
I do perfectly.
Yoli understands
It takes a little bit of processing.
Yoli will do the driving when you come and visit. All right, let's head home. Obviously, it goes without saying that while you're on holiday, your neighbors in the apartment are living their lives, so you want to keep noise to a minimum. And the things to keep in mind are when you're going up and down the stairs, with suitcases late at night or early in the morning, try not to make a lot of noise. Often people's living rooms are right on the other side of that front door, just as it is actually in my apartment here in Madrid. 2, remember that walls are often very thin between apartments in Spain, so your neighbors may be able to hear everything you're doing. And 3, the other thing is that although we don't really have siestas so much anymore, it's not that common, it's generally considered still that on the weekends from say 4 to 7 p.m, it's kind of a quiet time where people are resting, particularly older people maybe, before the evening kicks off. So keep noise to a minimum during those times. And a pet peeve of mine is how many Airbnb owners don't give tourists enough information about how to properly dispose of their trash. So each city in Spain handles separating out recycling a little bit differently. But at its most basic, you're going to want to separate out plastics, paper, glass, and just general trash. So there should ideally be a separate bin in the apartment for each one. So if the owner hasn't given you information about how to do that, make sure you ask them. So this one really took me by surprise when I moved to Spain. See, Spaniards are very comfortable holding your gaze for what might feel like to you a slightly uncomfortable amount of time. If you're walking down the street and somebody walks past you, they might lock your eyes for what feels like a few seconds too long, or you're sitting on the metro. The same thing might happen if you lock eyes with someone. You see, Spaniards are super comfortable in that situation, and I love it. But I stare back too sometimes, but Yoli tells me I stare for too long. So obviously, non-Spaniards can't do it. We can't get away with it. So this does not give you carte blanche to stare at people, but just know that if someone's holding your gaze, if someone's staring into your eyes, it doesn't mean that they love you. I mean, they might love you, but it doesn't really mean anything. It's just kind of how they do it here. Okay, so now that you're an expert on Spain's unspoken rules, it's time to start planning where you're going to eat when you come here to visit. So check out this playlist that's appearing up here, where I show you some of my favorite tapas bars and restaurants in the country. We'll see you over there in a moment.